Hello and welcome back to season 3 of Financial Secrets Revealed. This is our last episode for the season, and we're wrapping up with something that's a bit of a favourite of mine, whiskey. So I'd like to invite onto the show Stephen Bailey. Welcome, Stephen.
Hi, Amanda. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming along. Now, when we're talking about meeting the experts, that's kind of a cool thing, to be an expert in whiskey investing. How did that happen?
Sure. Naturally, a lot of drinking to start off with.
A tipple or
So,
two, a wee dram?
yeah, exactly. Just a few. And then started tasting a few different ones, and I started doing a bit of my own research with it and everything. And then my business partner that we were working on another project on during COVID told me that, hey, have you looked at whiskey as an investment opportunity? So he's running the founding company over in Singapore, and I said, let me have a look at it. So I spent 3 or 4 months doing my due diligence on it. And yeah, there was a lot of factors that stacked up for me to jump on board and yeah, bring it to Australia and see what we can do here.
So you're a financial advisor by trade. How did you get into financial services and then, I suppose, become interested in bringing this to Australia for other investors?
Sure. So I was running my own business for 14 years up until 2020. And then, yeah, decided, had enough of this. And so I looked at a few other things, opportunities. And funds management is always one of the things I love, and investments. I'm good at doing the research on things and all different classes and so on. And this stacked up from the fact that, yeah, it's just it's not reliant on the interest rate cycles, stock market cycles, things like that. It's quite different and doesn't correlate with any of those. So when I looked at those and how the actual you can own the actual product and you have it fully insured and things like that, and then looked at the various regulations and some areas have more than others. So I decided, yeah, so go to there for it. And we're now in the process of setting up a full wholesale fund, as well as selling them retail casks.
Right. So I'm a bit of a fan of whiskey myself and attend monthly masterclasses at my local whiskey lounge. I also have a trip to Scotland in my future in the next couple of weeks that I'm very much looking forward to going to the scene of the crime in Scotland. So.
Exactly. So what's your favourite sort of whiskies? Is it peaty?
I don't mind the peaties. Usually have to be in the mood and have the weather a bit cooler for that. I do like the,
Yes.
and I'm going to probably say it wrong. Is it Oban or Oban? I don't mind that.
Yep. Yep.
So, yeah, have enjoyed learning lots about the distilling process, the angel tax, the I suppose the massive uptake globally now of whiskey. The one coming up this month is all featuring Indian whiskies, and the Australian whiskey market's growing. And there's that rivalry between the Scottish and the Irish. Where they're triple distilled versus double. So fascinating
Yep.
subject that obviously if
Yep.
you're interested, you can go completely down the rabbit hole on. And for most people, I think investing in a whiskey might be, I buy a really nice bottle duty free and put it away for a while. That's not the sort of investing you're talking about. So, how does investing in whiskey or a cask of whiskey actually work, and what sort of returns are likely?
Sure. So whiskey is different in the aspect like a wine. You can buy a bottle of wine and cellar it, and in 10 years' time, it might have improved and increased in value, things like that. Whiskey actually is something you hold in the cask, and that's when it improves in taste or becomes mature and the values go up. So, an 18-year-old whiskey, for example, has been in the cask for 18 years. Once you bottle it, it can no longer, well, most of them don't improve.
Yeah, true.
If I bought an 18-year-old bottle now and I drank it in 5 years' time, it should be roughly exactly the same taste. Okay, unlike wine. So it's very much casks that are sold for investors, and they can be anywhere from your quarter cask, smaller ones, to your hogsheads, and anywhere in between, sort of thing. And they really, way it works is basically we find casks for clients. So we've got a lot of different sellers and buyers and distilleries, some independent bottlers we deal with, and things like that. So yeah, when a client comes to us and they're interested in investing in the whiskey cask, we sort of sit down with them, and if they say, "Oh, I would like a Lefroy one or something from Speyside or the Highlands or something," if they've got a specific request, we can try and source that. Otherwise, we'll come up with a few recommendations from our suppliers according to their budget and work out what's the. And the important thing is to understand what the client's exit strategy is. Okay, so we generally say it's a 5 year minimum term, but that said, it can be less and it can be sort of 5 to 10 years or anything like that. It can be in your self managed super funds as an alternative asset class, as long as your investment strategy allows for it, or or you can own it in your own name and any other structure that you're investing in, a lot like other investments.
So if someone sort of comes to you and would like to start, if they're looking at a full hogshead you mentioned, what sort of pricing is it? Does it depend on the area, or you can go, look, I've only got 10,000 or I've got 40,000. What are the sort of entry level through to, getting the most out of, buying the whole kit and caboodle?
Sure. Okay. There's a number of factors that have to be taken into consideration when you're looking at what's the best investment choice. Um, Obviously, as I said, the exit strategy and the time frame of the investor is one of the considerations. Price is always a consideration. At the start, you might be looking at what they call the new fill, which is a spirit or a new make, as some people refer it to. So it can be brand new, coming off the distillery, and it's cast straight away into whatever cask, bourbon, sherry, various casks there, and you can go into those, and it can be has to be at least 3 years in the cask before it's allowed by the Scottish Whisky Association to be called a whisky. Okay, so anything under 3 years, it's still a spirit. Okay, but after that, it can be sold off to blenders. It can be a single malt can be sold to independent bottlers and other investors as well. So we have a range of networks. So we look at that. We look at how much alcohol by volume or ABV is in the cask itself, and look at whether it's a first cask or a second cask. Sometimes the casks are transferred from a bourbon to a sherry, and they're regauged and things like that in there. So we take those into consideration, and we also look at the history of the distilleries as well, and their branding and their names and things like that, because that does affect the price as well. It's a lot like other investments. There's basic economics of supply and demand. So we take all those things into consideration when we're looking at for the right choice for the investor.
So if it's a large price to go in, say 40,000 plus and someone doesn't have that but would like to try, can you go in with other investors to pool your funds to put together? How
Yeah,
does it work?
yeah, on pricing, absolutely. So you can go in from anywhere from about £3,500 upwards, so roughly 7,000 Aussie dollars. That's at the lower end for cars. And then you go anywhere up to $500,000 or even more if you really got the money for it. And yes, you can go in whatever structure you like. You can have a company invest in it. You can have the unit trusts. It's really up to the investor and whatever's allowed by the laws of investing. It's just like buying shares and things like that. It's the same for whiskey casks.
And does it work the same that, look, I can pick a dud share or I can pick, a blue chip? Does it work the same with whiskey that it might not be as great as, if I stick with a name I know, like a Lafroig, am I going to do better with that? Or might this new up and comer be a bit of a, what could have been a penny dreadful that went really well on the share market?
Yeah. Look, you generally don't get as high a risk as the penny dreadfuls there. That's I sort of say there's an element of gambling with those because you could lose all your money or you could make a lot of money with those sorts of things. With the whiskies, we tend to look at, yeah, you can get some that will outperform others a little bit better. And you look at how much has been made in them by the distilleries, all that sort of fun stuff, and understand that with it there as well. But no, you don't. You generally don't have the same volatility in the whiskey market as you do stock markets and things like that. And we do like to make sure we build the relationships with clients in this space, and so whether they want to bottle it themselves at the end and have it there, which some people want to do that. So some people want to say, hey, I want this cask and I want it as a single malt for 10 years' time. I want to be able to bottle it myself, which we can facilitate as well. So it's really up to the investors' strategy and plans, but definitely you can invest in a number of ways with it, no problems there.
And knowing the history of whiskey and how it sort of, if I'm going back, a bit of an Outlander fan, but after the Battle of Culloden, the British
Okay.
came in and banned it all and, the stills
Yeah.
were illegal. And then you eventually had to register if you were going to do the stills and the government would give you, a cent to do that. Once, it was just the families and the clans doing this, how did it come about that people could then invest in this? Was it just that they'd go and ask people for investment money to help out? Or how long is the actual history of whiskey investing and the returns and being able to research it? How long's that go on for?
Oh, look, it's been going on for hundreds of years. Okay. So trading whiskey casks is how it all started. So, yeah, the distilleries need money to hold the casks and to keep producing. So they need the cash there. So they sell to investors to hold for it, to help them fund their business. So it's very cash reliant sort of business there from the distillery perspective. And it started way back, yeah, lot older than Australia is there. But so it's been going on a very long time, and the markets are only growing. And it basically came about when people started realizing, hey, there's the opportunity there. Then brokers came about, and that's effectively what we are. We buy and sell on behalf of clients over the short, long term, whatever the needs are. We get approached by blenders and people looking for bulk buys of casks, as well as the individual that wants to put 20, 30 or $100,000 in. We get all sorts of requests in there. So it's comes about with supplying what's required, and what's available also. But the independent bottling market has really taken off since the 1980s. And more recently, it's had another surge. And that's because of the single malts there. The single malts have really taken off in a lot of the marketplace. And they've really gone hard because places like India, Japan's up and coming there. But America's still the number one market for it. But as you know, probably it's a sort of it's a comfort drink and it's an aspirational drink for those markets as well. So it's seen as a degree of class, sophistication in a lot of markets, and that's what's driving the demand for it. And the great thing is, whiskey's drunk at weddings and celebrations and birthdays, but it's also drunk at funerals and sad times and when we're just feeling like, hey, I need to relax at the end of a busy week or a busy day, we all drink whiskey, and the global demand for it is expected to grow by sort of 5% until at least the early 2030s. So I think the last research I saw was 5% until 2034 was the latest prediction, global demand. So when you've got demand like that, there, then it's just huge. And yeah, last year in 2023, there was 43 bottles of Scotch whisky sold worldwide every second.
Wow.
So,
Wow. That's incredible.
when you think of it that way, yeah, it's a market that you can't see it, the demand dropping off, and the supplies are trying to keep up, and it's growing in Scotland. And Scottish whisky is considered the granddaddy of whiskies, if you
Mm,
like.
yeah.
So,
Unless you ask an
yeah.
Irishman.
And even maybe a Japanese or the upcoming Australian.
I was lucky enough to head to the Jack Daniels distillery in Lynchburg, Tennessee last year, which was really
Okay.
interesting. And they had the inside of a barrel there, and they've named it in honor of Frank Sinatra because of him sitting on stage always with a glass of Jack Daniels or a whiskey. So they've actually made the Sinatra now in honor of Frank for putting them on the map.
Oh,
So that was really
um,
fascinating as well. So with the whiskies, like you hear the rumors that Scotland's running out of peat. Would that mean that you'd want to look at, maybe a peated whiskey would be better because there'll be less of those, or is it just any old whiskey will do to invest in? How do you find, I suppose, even a trend in whiskey, or do you just leave it to a broker to advise you on what's best?
look, there is a lot of research that can be done. I mean, like most things now, first place people go when they're looking things up is the internet, Google, and all those sorts of things. The Scottish Whisky has Association has a good site there that gives you a lot of background on the Scottish side of things. And worldwide, there's each of the countries, like America, has their research and everything like that. So you can do your own research. You can, like I did last year, I went and visited a number of distilleries in Scotland myself as well, and went to look at the bonded warehouses and things like that. But it's not definitely not any old whiskey will do. Okay, you do have to be a little bit careful when it's investing. Okay, it's like buying your shares. You can do your own research, but quite often stockbrokers, or you can get the research houses that actually have relationships or connections within that industry or that company specific. We have, as brokers, we have direct connections into a number of distilleries throughout Scotland. We have a number of industry connections throughout the world there as well. So we attend a fair bit of functions throughout the world as well, keeping our knowledge and research up and things like that. So that's why, yes, we can help with a bit more specific information for clients there. And it's not. Yes, there's some talk that peat is reducing in Scotland, things like that. but the grain whiskey is an up and coming thing, as well as the wheat and things like that. So that's another factor that's there as well. So there's a number of things you look at. Yes, what's the demand of it? If you look at the marketing side of things, without much of a doubt, the number one marketing company for Scottish whisky is Macallan. So McClellan is well known. It's generally high price. In Singapore and Raffles, they've got their own sort of area and store, and you can go and do a visit and learn about all the history and everything like that. So they've got a big budget. They're a big distiller and things like that. Does it make it the best investment? That's your choice to make there. From our perspective, there are other opportunities we look at more, and probably more in the price range with it there. But you should look at the demand there, how much is made by the distillery as well. And you mentioned the Angel's share earlier. So the Angel share is what is termed as the evaporation of the whiskey and the liquid within the cask. Okay, and that average is around about 2% a year. Okay, so you have to consider that as well. And then how much alcohol by volume is in the cask. That can help determine as well what the price is of the cask as well. Okay, so because if you buy something with 46% alcohol by volume, it's got to be bottled at 40% or above. Anything under 40%, you can't bottle it. Okay, yep. So yep. You haven't got such a long time for investing when it's at that level there. Okay, so you've got to think of something. If you buy something that's got a 65 to 75 ABV, then you've got that time there.
And boy, do they blow your head off when you have a have a snort of those.
Well, there's medicinal ones there that are only good when you
All I'm hearing, Stephen, is that you've got the absolute dream job where you have to travel around the world and do research into whiskies by trying them, and you have to go to Raffles in Singapore to see how Macallan's run their marketing. I'm very sympathetic to you and this dreadful job you've got. Researching whiskey. I think my trip to Scotland has suddenly become a research tour. So.
That's exactly right.
I'm just going to have the accountant phone.
Don't go between December and February to Scotland unless you've got a lot of coats and gloves.
No. End of May, I should be okay. I might be a top of 13, but I should be okay.
That's warm in Scotland, exactly.
Now, what sort of returns can people expect? I mean, it sounds fabulous, and okay, at the end of the term, I might be able to grab a few bottles for myself or put them away for the kids. What are we looking at, a very average sort of return? I mean, some people talk of these massive returns and it's the best performing asset class. What's the realistic thing that people can look at for investing in whiskey?
Yeah, so we generally look at around, historically, the average return is between about 14 and 18% per annum. Okay.
But we'll do our disclaimer that historically that doesn't mean it's going
to be correct.
Doesn't predict future returns.
No. And we have been through a bit of a climb over the last few years, particularly with COVID and the drinking that everyone was doing through there and ordering online and everything like that. So you have to factor in a bit of the market trends and things like that, absolutely. But generally speaking, with the markets and everything like that, we sort of target at least a 13% return. And I'll tell all yourself and all your investors, there are plenty of people out there with rubbish marketing. We've got a catalogue of it, and we see it saying guaranteed 40% return per annum for the next 10 years. Or
so the old, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, does apply in whiskey as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, you do have to do your research, and watch out for the real strong salespeople and spruikers that push them. If they don't give you options, and if they're not willing to be patient with you, ask why. Yeah, it's the one thing we're very proud to be sort of representing the industry, that we operate a transparent business and we don't push for people into things. We work with clients. Sometimes clients will come to you and you'll have a first meeting, second meeting, they're all ready to go. But some clients take 6 months of researching it themselves, and that's fine by us. We would rather a client take their time and understand what they're investing in. As a
It should be the
financial
same for
advisor.
any investor.
Exactly. We'd rather have a good relationship with people that can sleep at night and are not going to ring us up going, oh, what you told me I was going to do this and what's happening and things like that.
Thankfully, you don't have the ticker on the news every night running across the bottom of the screen telling you what your shares are doing. So people going, what have you put me into? There's a benefit.
Yeah, definitely. I just look at my whiskey casks on the bar at home and just think, oh, I wonder how much is that's worth now.
Might just have another wee dram to see if it still tastes.
Yeah.
Drinking the profits, that's the problem.
Exactly. But,
so looking at this, you said there's a Scotch Whisky Association in Scotland that people can look at. Obviously, the Irish have got a very big market. The Japanese are dominating. There's, Scandinavia's got whiskies, to Mexico now. So getting through all the noise, obviously some of these countries might not be where brokers are looking to invest. Is it mostly the Scottish market that is the key market for investors?
Oh, look, I think it is the key market, but the Irish whiskey and the Japanese whiskey is certainly making its mark. Okay, so and that's for investors as well as the tastings of it as well. People are starting to look at it and to go, how do I get into those markets? But when you look at the Scottish whisky market, it's got over 60% of the worldwide sales. So when you look at it from that side of things, you go, okay, do I want to go with something that's a bit more proven with supply and demand and things like that with it there? Yes. And you have to look at the markups that companies put on there, make sure it's a fair value you're looking at for the cask and things like that. And it's not always easy to do, but because you don't go to a retail shop and go, that litre bottle of whiskey is $100, so therefore my cask with 100 litres of it should be X. It doesn't work that way. Okay, so don't go looking at retail values of bottles and think, oh, the cask is going to be similar and things like that, because that's not how it works.
I had a girlfriend once ask me to buy her some gold earrings at a souk in Dubai, and then she sent me the gold price. And I'm like, that's not how it works. You're paying for this, artisan to make you this beautiful. There's time and there's the intricacy and there's the education factors that, like you said, there's the marketing, there's the distiller's wages, there's the storage, there's so many factors. Yeah. So, interesting how it all flows in.
One of the things that I really like as well is you don't get many products you actually buy where you can actually get really cheap insurance on the product. So your storage houses, or bonded warehouses as they're called in Scotland, they all come with insurance on them, which the investors pay for. It's a fully insured product against fire, theft, flood and damage.
It'd be a pretty big fire if they went up with all that Angel's share evaporating away in some of those
I think
warehouses.
they'd be getting the fire brigades from England to come across to Scotland to help.
Wow. Wow. Crazy.
So definitely there. And one of the things about the bonded warehouses, when I did my visits over there and visited a couple of them, I love the way that they have sensors in the warehouses that can detect leaking casks and things like that, as well as them doing regular inspections across all of it, all the warehouse every few days. So they're pretty onto it over there for that sort of thing to make sure you're not losing anything there. And if it's owned by an investor, they contact the investor or the broker for it to discuss any issues. But I've not heard of any of our clients ever having that issue, but I'm sure it can happen.
Interesting. Good old technology. When it works, it's brilliant, isn't it? So that's a really good use for it, I reckon. Don't want the leaky car.
Yeah, don't want to waste the whiskey.
Funny, I remember being in Japan probably about 12 years ago and just going to a supermarket for some snacks with the kids, and you could buy whiskey in what we would sell like a 2 litre olive oil container, like a plastic. Just whiskey off the supermarket shelf. We were just gobsmacked at how the different countries have embraced it and gone with it, and that was a while ago now. But whether I'd put it in anything but a Scotch and dry, maybe if it's coming out of a plastic container in a supermarket, it's probably not going to be my fireside tipple.
Exactly, a Coke blend.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yeah. But
thank you so
it's
much.
amazing it's amazing in Singapore and other countries throughout Asia. They have just whiskey shops, so many of them. Here we have your Dan Murphys and your bottle shops,
Yep.
and things like that have a mix of them with every other type of alcohol. But throughout Asia in particular and parts of Europe, I've seen it where you have specific whiskey shops. So
There's one in Kensington in London that's one of my favourites, simply called the Whisky Shop. And when I first found it, there was a grand piano in there and somebody playing while you browsed the whiskey. They have quite interesting mix. And they do sell some for people who like to just collect rare whiskies. But yeah, it's an interesting concept. So really appreciate you taking the time out to share all that with us, Stephen. I'll make sure I've got all your contact details in the show notes if anybody's interested in reaching out. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been great.